comme nous avons...
Good morning, everyone. We have quorum. We'll begin right away. So, welcome to the meeting number 49 to the Committee for the Status of Women. And pursuant to Standing Orders 102, we go on with our study of sexual harassment in the federal workplace. And we have the RCMP with us this morning. We have Assistant Commissioner Sharon Woodburn, who is Director General, Workforce Programs and Services. Good morning.
Good morning, and we also are joined with Superintendent Michael O'Reilly, who's Director of the Legislative Reform Initiative. Good morning. Welcome. And thank you for having accepted our invitation to join us this morning. We look forward to hearing your testimony. And without further ado, I will hand you the floor, and you will have 10 minutes for your presentations. Please go ahead. You have 10 minutes.
Members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this opportunity to come before the committee to contribute to your study of sexual harassment in workplaces in the federal jurisdiction. Here with me today is Superintendent Michael O'Reilly, who is leading the Legislative Reform Initiative for the RCMP. He will be able to answer any questions relating to Bill C-42. The work of the RCMP has a profound impact on all Canadians. The RCMP's mandate is multifaceted, and every employee within the force contributes their skill and expertise to deliver quality policing services. All employees of the RCMP are responsible for enhancing and maintaining the health and strength of the organization. The Commissioner and senior management has committed to an every employee engaged approach whereby expectations of conduct relating back to our core values are discussed with each RCMP employee and agreed to. La GRC embauche des hommes et des femmes avec...
Men and women are recruited into the RCMP with the expectation that they will become part of a world-class policing organization. Employees of the RCMP expect that their colleagues, no matter their position or role, will do their very best to maintain and further this image in how they deal with the public and each other.
To enjoy high levels of public approval and support. And the vast majority of the women and men carry out their duties every day in a professional and diligent manner. However, over the past few years, concerns regarding harassment, accountability, and existing human resource management practices have been raised. In this regard, we are not meeting the high expectations of Canadians. J'en profite pour vous décrire certains des efforts.
I would like to take this opportunity to describe some of the efforts we are making to enhance our accountability and to establish a respectful work environment with zero tolerance for inappropriate harassing behavior.
Taking steps to effect organizational change that will address two key factors: numerative inequality, or the difference between the number of men and women in the workplace, and normative standards, or those aspects of organizational culture that can contribute to harassment. According to Statistics Canada, the representation of women within policing services across Canada has increased from 17.3% in 2005 to 19.6% in 2011. The representation of female regular members within the RCMP has kept pace with this increase, rising from 18.1% to 20.1% over the same period. In spite of this, these rates remain below the labour market availability for women who are interested in a career in policing, which was estimated to be 27% in the 2006 census. This means there is room to have more women in policing. The Commissioner has announced an increase in the recruiting benchmark for women from 30% to 35%. To have a more equitable level of representation of female police officers in all ranks throughout the RCMP. We are committed to achieving a more equitable gender balance to help create a better, more respectful workplace. I will now talk about the normative factors. The RCMP must develop the means to change behaviors, to set new standards and expectations, and to hold all employees accountable for their actions, for their behaviors. Regardons le sondage auprès des fonctionnaires.
The results of the Public Service Employee Survey in both 2008 and 2011 indicate that about 30% of RCMP respondents reported being harassed in the past 2 years. This percentage is essentially the same as those found throughout the core public administration.
1,102 complaints of harassment have been filed in the RCMP. This is an average of 150 complaints a year. Of these, 57% refer to interpersonal deportment, 36% are identified as abuse of authority, 4% relate to discrimination as defined under the Canadian Human Rights Act, and 3% as sexual harassment. What this tells us is that harassment continues to be reported at a consistent rate in the RCMP. This is unacceptable. The steps we are committed to taking to overcome this issue include focusing on a more respectful workplace, improving training practices, establishing procedures and processes to prevent, investigate, and resolve harassment complaints. Changer de culture signifie, entre autres.
Part of changing our culture is the early identification and handling of harassing behavior at the onset. Some unacceptable actions are more obvious than others and can be readily addressed. However, some forms are more insidious and less apparent and require and any definition of harassing behavior, sexual or otherwise, will always be subjective to a certain extent. The challenge is to clearly define what is considered to be unacceptable conduct and to know when to intervene.
Expectations can be established that action will be taken to point out and stop improper conduct immediately. The RCMP is identifying and developing a continuum of what is considered to be disrespectful and harassing conduct to better hold employees, especially supervisors and managers, accountable for taking action. Establishing the responsibilities of supervisors and managers is also vital to achieving this. The commissioner or senior managers, such as commanding officers, cannot oversee the daily interactions of every employee. We put this trust in our many managers and supervisors. We also must give those managers and supervisors the training and tools to prevent and effectively handle conflict in the workplace and any inappropriate behavior they see at an early stage. The RCMP has had a mandatory online harassment awareness and prevention training for all employees since 2005. This was a step in the right direction in raising awareness. However, we recognize the need to do more. We are also enhancing leadership development, focusing on core components such as how to manage workplace relations, how to identify and address conflict and harassment, and how to build and maintain respectful workplaces. The RCMP is implementing a respectful workplace program which sets out expectations for all employees of what supports respectful and harassment-free workplaces. The program also outlines how to recognize when these expectations are not being met, how to engage in early intervention, and how to rebuild relationships. The program is built on the Treasury Board policy on the prevention and resolution of harassment in the workplace and supplemented by the RCMP Act. However, the two processes do not align in purpose, process, or outcome. S'il est adopté, le projet de loi C4.
Bill C-42, the Enhancing Royal Canadian Mounted Police Accountability Act, if passed, would provide the RCMP with the necessary tools to effectively make improvements within the force, such as in the areas of conduct, grievance, and discipline processes and procedures. The proposed legislation will provide the Commissioner the authority to deal with harassment directly by establishing streamlined procedures for the investigation and resolution of harassment complaints.
Committee for inviting us here today and for undertaking this study. Our intention is to continue making changes through the actions that I have outlined today. Our goal is to become a primary contributor to the creation of safe, healthy, respectful workplaces in the federal public service. Thank you. My colleague and I would be pleased to provide further information in response to any questions.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. So let's move on to questions immediately. You have 7 minutes.
I'd like to thank you both for coming. I know everyone here has been looking forward to your visit, and I'm sure everyone has a lot of great questions for you. You had mentioned when just a few minutes ago that the RCMP has taken some steps to increase accountability and transparency within the RCMP. Could you just reiterate again what they were and what are the steps that they would be taking, and have you noticed any impacts so far?
Thank you for the question. Some of the steps, there's a bunch of different steps related to different aspects of trying to get to the respectful workplace and transparency. So obviously the policies, we are updating all of our policies and working with Treasury Board to do that. We're also building some guides right now for employees so that they understand what harassment is, what a respectful workplace is. The guides are also for the human resource personnel who work with them. Service standards, we're looking at those for timelines and such. We're looking in the area of leadership. That's been very important. The Commissioner's Every Employee Engaged initiative that he started in July directly applies to your question, I think. He met with all of his senior leaders across the force and explained what he expected from us. He also explained 5 points that he wanted to emphasize, and one of which was directly related to respectful workplace, but also supervision, accountability, transparency, discipline, and those sort of things. He followed that up with a video message to all employees in the RCMP. And I forget the second part of your question.
Just if you noticed any impact so far. Maybe it's a little too early, but
it's probably too early to see impacts, but I do know that the topic itself really seems to come to the forefront, and we're very much talking about these things, which is a good thing, I think.
Great, thank you. The Minister of Public Safety, in consultation with Commissioner Paulson, referred the matter of sexual harassment complaints to the Commission for Public Complaints against the RCMP. Could you advise the committee of the progress of this investigation and when we might expect a report?
I'm not sure on the exact date of the report. I know that they are. We gave full cooperation, opened up all of our files, of course, and they were even in our building for a while reading the files. But I'm not sure of the exact date.
Okay, thank you. Do you know how many submissions related to sexual harassment in the workplace have been received by the Commission for Public Complaints against the RCMP so far, or would you have that data?
No, I don't.
Okay. What sort of policy and procedural recommendations is the Commission for Public Complaints against the RCMP empowered to make? Like policy recommendations or training recommendations, or are there other recommendations that, do they have carte blanche?
Well, given that it's a recommendation, I'm not sure there's a limit on it, but I don't know the specifics of that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. In your remarks, you had mentioned that the RCMP has a mandatory online harassment awareness and prevention training for all employees since 2005. How is this monitored? How is that monitored? So if it's a mandatory online harassment program, like how do we know everybody's doing that?
It's monitored from the Policy Center, so that's part of the central oversight. I know that the statistics as of last week were 94% of every employee had taken that course.
And then you also mentioned that they would be establishing procedures and processes to prevent, investigate, and resolve harassment complaints. Have they been established?
For the most part, the procedures, well, we have our policy in existence, our 2005, so we already have procedures and policies. We are amending those. They're evolving. Little bits are changed as the policy goes along, but we're looking at a more substantial change presently to match the Treasury Board policy that just came out.
Okay. And will harassment policy that directly includes sexual harassment be implemented? Like, are they going to have one specifically for sexual harassment?
No, not at this point. It's within the definition of harassment, but there isn't a separate policy for sexual harassment.
Also, in your remarks, you mentioned that the Commissioner had announced an increase in the recruiting benchmark for women from 30 to 35% to have a more equitable level of representation of female police officers throughout the RCMP. How are they doing this? How are they going to bring that benchmark up from 30 to 35?
Recruiting has the proactive portion of recruiting has the ability to focus in on certain segments of society, and in this case, it depends on exactly where you're located, but there's many different initiatives going on to bring up the rate of women applying to the RCMP, and things such as women-only exam sessions or women-only physical testing or information sessions. And anything, your imagination is the limit, really, for those type of things.
So are they doing, how many? One? 1 minute. Yeah. So are they having, a different type of recruiting seminars for women that might be interested, or?
Yes, that's right. That's right. They would have recruiting information sessions is one of our first stages, and they would be targeted for women only, for instance, and I don't know the exact information, how it would differ, but it would be specific to the women in the audience.
Right, okay. And do you think the changes brought forth in Bill C-42 would allow the RCMP to address the issues of harassment within the RCMP?
I'll have to address that to my colleague.
It'll be a very quick answer, I think.
Thank you. Excuse me. Yes, absolutely. One of the barriers that we face right now is the structural differences between applying the processes for investigation and resolution of a harassment complaint where a member is the respondent under the Treasury Board policy, or applying the Part 4 of the RCMP Act. There are two very different processes, and Bill C-42 would provide the opportunity to overcome that barrier.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. So let's now move to across the table. Ms. Ashton, you have 7 minutes. Thank you, and I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here.
Frank, the driver behind this this study, actually began with wanting to look into the egregious experiences brought forward by women in the RCMP. It was extended more broadly to sexual harassment in the federal workforce, but as we know, that what's the stories brought forward have brought forward by RCMP members, women RCMP members have gripped Canadians, and also have had a general impact on their viewing of our national police force. We've had a few occasions to discuss what is going on. And I want to say that unfortunately today we're not hearing from rank and file members, women members that would have experiences to share that reflect the harassment and discrimination that they have faced, and certainly for us in the NDP that is an omission, especially when our role as a committee is to bring forward recommendations as to how things can be improved within the RCMP and more broadly in federal workforces. But what we're one of the things that we certainly, and I had the chance to work on the Public Safety Committee as well around Bill C-42. And I just want to pause on that for a moment to say that I was shocked actually to know that C-42 doesn't actually say the word harassment anywhere in the entire document, which I think to anybody is an indication of the. I mean, if you don't actually name the problem, I mean, is it the elephant in the room, or is it? I mean, there is a reference I know to incidents, but certainly the words and sexual harassment particularly. That have been at the top of mind for so many Canadians aren't actually mentioned in C-42, and I want to note that the NDP initially said that we would support it based on the what we believe to be a true intent to modernize the RCMP and deal with critical issues like sexual harassment, but unfortunately we saw that it was lacking, and the amendments that we put forward were actually not passed. And I mean, whether it was adding mandatory harassment training for RCMP members, specifically to the RCMP Act, ensuring a fully independent civilian review body to investigate complaints against the RCMP, adding a provision to create a national civilian investigative body that would avoid police investigating police, and creating a more balanced human resource policy policy by removing some of the more draconian powers proposed for the RCMP commissioner, and by strengthening the External Review Committee in cases involving possible dismissal from the force. All of these amendments were not passed, and we believe, therefore, that C-42 is inadequate in dealing with a host of gaps, but very predominantly sexual harassment in the RCMP. Now, we've been made aware of the intention of dealing with sexual harassment, which of course is encouraging, but intention isn't enough, and it's not as though these allegations came up in the last couple of years. They've been going on for a long time, and talk is not enough. And we also have heard about the disincentive to women and men as well in joining the RCMP as a result of these allegations of harassment. So I want to talk about. I mean, when we hear a lot about intention, and certainly we believe training is important, but one of the recurring themes is culture in the workplace, and Commissioner Paulson actually referred to it as well when he first came to speak with us a number of months ago. And we've heard from other witnesses as well that when you have a highly hierarchical organization, the RCMP, but others as well, and you don't have women in positions of power or women represented in an equitable manner, that creates a culture where harassment is far more prone to harassment. And so we've heard about the target to hire 35% more women, and you spoke a bit about how you're planning to do that. What is the timeline around that target, and how solid is that target? I'd like to know that we'd like to see 50%, so that the RCMP actually reflects our population. But what are the solid timelines and goals you have so that we know when to look forward to that result?
Thank you. There's no end date to the benchmark, so therefore there's no timeline for it. It's for the next few years. Obviously, the intention is to keep going and pushing and doing what we can to get there. I can tell you that we are definitely headed in the right direction there. I'm looking at some statistics from 2009 where we had 18% women enrolled into depot, and then it progresses through the years. 2011 and 12 we had 27, and then this year, right up until September, we had 24% already. So it's definitely increasing and coming up. The goal obviously is to keep going, and maybe it'll be readjusted. I'm not sure, but as many as possible.
In terms of looking at putting women in positions of power, and whether it's managerial or other levels, in order to ensure that again the organization, both rank and file, but also as you move up the ladder, reflects the population of women in Canada.
Right. The women, the statistics it will show that the women in the force, 20%, give or take, depending on what level you're at, and then it kind of drops off a bit, and then it starts to build up again in senior management. We can't. The feeder pool is what will get us there. So that's the part of the importance of the 35%, is to build that base, because each promotion has. Obviously, there's requirements, and you have to have experience. So the more we have in the feeder pool, the logic is that the more we'll have in the upper levels. I can tell you that it's hopeful. It's looking good. I mean, last year at this time we had 2 assistant commissioners of my rank, and then this year we have 4 with 1 in the works. So it'll be 5 within weeks, kind of thing. So.
I was also wondering, do you do exit surveys when RCMP members, women, men, leave, to find out why they're leaving?
They are done. I can't give you a statistic on the amount that are done. They are offered. It's part of our process to offer those to people.
Do you know if there's any questions?
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to interrupt you as your time is up. So we'll now move back across the table with Madame O'Neill-Gordon, and you have 7 minutes.
And welcome. We're happy to have you with us this morning. Thank you for appearing with us today, and your presentation will definitely give us a much clearer understanding of the role of the RCMP in dealing with grievances of sexual harassment in the workplace. And I want to congratulate you. You mentioned in your report that the RCMP has had a mandatory online harassment awareness and prevention training for all employees since 2005. And we congratulate you for taking a step in the right direction, as it is important, and it is very important in raising this awareness among the employees. I'm wondering what changes are proposed that deal specifically with sexual harassment in the workforce.
So the changes that deal with sexual harassment are based around the policies. As I've mentioned, we're updating, we're building guides, and this will be the first time I think we've used the guides. We're basing those on the Treasury Board guides. They'll give examples to help people really identify what is and what isn't sexual harassment. The guides will pose a bunch of questions so that they can look at their own behavior and such. The other portion of new things or emphasized things is the training. We're working. The Policy Center is working with training to embed pieces of respectful workplace and harassment into almost a full continuum. It's very comprehensive. I would start at depot, for example. That's not new, but and then go into the field coaching program. They're also embedding, or have just recently embedded, training into our supervisory development program, and then into our management development program. They're working right now with the officer development program, and that's a whole continuum of training during one's career. The hiring initiatives, the leadership shown through the central oversight. This is a positive step. And administration of harassment. We've just gone on to an electronic case management of our harassment cases, so we'll be able to better track our trends and the actual cases themselves to keep tabs on it.
Okay, thank you. So then, would you say then that there is much improvement in the atmosphere and in the rapport of the workplace with the RCMP? You see?
The workplace, I mean, I represent the RCMP, but I can't speak for every single person, and I would say we're definitely headed in the right direction. It's we have a lot of initiatives going on, all targeted to making the workplace respectful for everybody. That's everybody's right to work in an area like that, and that's what we've committed to.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very important issue, and one that we are studying a lot of and very concerned about, as everyone is really in the. So I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on. That's my question now. We see as well that the committee is aware that the RCMP chose to participate in the Public Service Employees Survey. And so I'm wondering do you have any insight into, will Bill C-42 be effective in addressing this differential in discrimination and harassment, is what I mean? If not, what other steps will be taken to address them? You see, will we need other steps besides Bill C-42? And what steps would you be looking at?
Well, I think a little bit of everything will help address the issue, not one law or one policy, I don't think. But and I've mentioned some of those in my last response, but maybe I'll allow Superintendent O'Reilly to comment on C-42 then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The best way to approach it, the way that we've been approaching it since probably 2008, 2009 is a systems approach, is that, as Assistant Commissioner Woodburn says, it's not one thing that will be the magic bullet to overcome these challenges. C-42 will definitely help because it will provide us the opportunity to overcome, as I was describing before, is this structural challenge we have right now, which is, while the Treasury Board policy on the prevention of harassment in the workplace is designed to rebuild relationships, to help relationships recover within the workplace. There is also an anticipation that if harassment is found, that there is a consequence, and oftentimes that's discipline. However, within the RCMP Act, there is only one way through which you can attain or reach the goal of determining whether or not misconduct has occurred, and that's through Part 4 of the RCMP Act, which is the discipline system. That's a very different process, very different target, very different intention, which is really focused on determining guilt, very adversarial, whereas with the Treasury Board policy, it's very much more focused on the early resolution, the accountability and expectation of managers and supervisors, and if I may use the term bystanders, to get involved and put a stop to inappropriate, uncivil behavior when it happens, rather than letting it build. So the whole systems approach really comes down to we need to make sure we set expectations, establish responsibilities, and then hold people accountable for whether or not they are taking the action they need to take in response to what we identify as inappropriate behavior. And as Assistant Commissioner Woodburn referred to in her... 1 minute. Oh, merci, Madame. In her opening remarks is the concept of a continuum of respectful behaviors. Because what we find, and what you'll find in the literature as well, is that there is this hesitancy among some people to take action if they're not quite sure if it's inappropriate, if it's not, and that hesitancy is what can lead to delay and ultimately lead to the frustration of people feeling that, one, they can't report because it won't be taken seriously because it's not taken seriously at the time. And then number two is that there's this expectation that we're not really sure where it's going to end up, whether it'll become discipline, whether it'll be harassment. And the bridge there, really there is no clear crosswalk. We have to figure it out as we go along. So C-42 will help us address that one chunk, the investigation, but the TB policy, and especially the new one, will help us address the early resolution.
Vous arrêter ici, malheureusement.
I'm afraid I must interrupt you, Mr. O'Reilly. Thank you for your understanding. So, Madam, Ms. Squirrel, it's your turn. You have 7 minutes.
For counting my time, could I just ask the clerk and I've been away for a bit, have you received the summary report on gender-based harassment and respectful workplace consultation that was done April 17th, 2012? Has the committee received that? Not yet. Okay. I will send a copy of the report over for distribution to the committee because I think it will be very informative. So now you can start the clock. Okay, thank you very much. Our time is always very, very precious around here. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate the kind intentions and all of the good words, but I have to tell you that I clearly remain very unconvinced that there will be much change. But I also will assure you that many of us in this committee are going to monitor that to the extent that we are able to ensure that the right legislation is in place and that we do everything possible to ensure that women are attracted to the service and that once they are there, they feel fully comfortable. And I think that's a whole lot more required than what is currently there. Ms. Woodburn, would you recommend for your daughter to join the RCMP in its current form?
I don't have a daughter, but
supposing you did.
Yeah, supposing I did, I most certainly would. Yes, I've had a very positive career, and I would pass on. Obviously, any child makes their own decision, and yeah.
Superintendent O'Reilly, I can ask you the same question. Would you recommend this as a career to your daughter?
That's a tough one, Madam Chair. The lifestyle of the RCMP is not something my daughter would be attracted to at any rate. However, if she was to come forward, her or my son, I would support them entirely. They would, in fact, be the third generation to join. But at this point, like I said, based on her personality, I don't think that would be something she'd be interested in.
The change it requires far more than just leadership. It's a question of changing the management style, the culture, the attitude that people have. And the RCMP are not alone. Of course, we know that in these issues. But, you know, all of the processes that are touted about all of the different ways you can do it, well, clearly they haven't been adequate. No one wants to make these kinds of complaints. They know they're career limiting. No matter how many laws we put in place, they're very career limiting for anybody who starts to go forward. In the report that I referenced earlier, I assume you both have had a copy of this. It was done in BC by E-Division. And so you're well aware of the comments that are in here from the survey that was done of existing members. And what they're asking for in here and what the recommendations are, that the establishment of a confidential place to seek information and advice, there needs to be awareness sessions and an harassment prevention and enhanced complaint and support process. But there also needs to be confidentiality, true confidentiality, so women can come forward with this kinds of complaints and not feel that they're going to be the victim. Could I get your comments on this report?
I have read the report, and I do know that our policy center is working closely with E-Division to follow what they've been doing since the report, and I think there's been a lot of good work that's started, maybe based on this report, but maybe based on before it, or just because of the negative publicity and things brought to light. And I know that the commanding officer of BC took that very seriously and to heart, and that he's definitely working on improving things there with some actions.
Now that is in one division, one area, but clearly the comments are that the Old Boys Club is alive and well. And again, it's not a 2011. This is a report that was just put out in April of 2012 by what is applauded to be as a very progressive deputy commissioner that really cares about this issue, clearly, that has taken this kind of initiative to interview over 400 people who have come forward with these complaints. And I would suggest that that's just the tip of the iceberg, because many people will have experienced it but have not decided not to put their careers in that jeopardy by going forward on it. Exactly what would they need to do to change that, other than getting up to 50% numbers and maybe getting better control that would give women that attitude that they can break out of this old boys club, or we can get rid of the old boys club and maybe we make it a women's club. Maybe it's time for a whole new attitude, but how did we get there? And I'm not hearing anything that's being done, whether it's C42 or elsewhere, that gives me any kind of confidence other than lots of great words, but little really serious action.
The comments, and like I said, I have read the report, and I, like you, was disheartened by some of those comments. It's not pleasant to imagine somebody feeling that way and in their workplace. I don't know the total sum of the comments and how many positive ones didn't make the report either. So, but I have to say that I agree. Not one thing will tackle this issue, and it's the perspective of the RCMP that there's a more holistic approach to this. And when I say we're updating our policy, well, that's just one part and portion of it. That goes along with the leadership demonstrated by the commissioner and by every senior manager. That goes along with the training, the new training, and reinforcing the old training. That goes along with the critical mass, and this is just my words, a critical mass of women. And you alluded to perhaps an old girls club. I think I'm not sure your exact wording, but the critical mass will get us there. And I don't know what that number is exactly, but I do know that would be a room where everybody feels comfortable in the meeting, and that the power imbalance is not necessarily with the man or that's the most senior at the table, because in the future I don't think that will be. I think we will see, based on everything we're doing, we will see a more balanced workplace, and therefore a more respectful one.
Thank you. Do you have confidence in the process?
Very quick. In the process,
the processes that we're talking about.
Yes, I have confidence, but I understand the processes, so I've worked with them, and perhaps maybe what we need to do is explain them better so that other people have confidence in them as well.
Thank you.
Je vous remercie, Madame Woodburn.
Thank you, Ms. Woodburn. So let's move on to the second round of questions. Ms. Bateman, you've got 5 minutes.
And I appreciate, not only that you're here, but that you are both empowering your daughters to make their own decisions. Certainly I would be in exactly the same position, and it would be at my peril that I would think any other way. But you're dealing with somebody's daughters, and that's very important. And I really want to understand better exactly what you're doing. Now, C-42 has some changes. You've both made references to the C-42, to the fact that Treasury Board currently governs the all employees of the Federal Public Service, and yet that there is a juxtaposition of that responsibility with Part 4 under the RCMP Act. Could you take a few minutes to enlighten me on and the committee on exactly how that fits and how it's going to work?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably the easiest way to describe it is that if an incident occurs, I'll give a rough sketch. If an incident occurs and it's not addressed immediately and it's allowed to fester, the person who is the target of the inappropriate behavior looks around for an opportunity to bring this to someone and have something done about it. Under the Treasury Board policy, the expectation is you'll be able to enter into an early resolution process. Efforts will be made to try to bring the parties together, if appropriate. There are different dispute resolution processes to address balances, impower balances, and issues like that. But the expectation is that you will be able to conduct an entire process focused on the harassing behavior to come to a determination whether harassment has occurred, what steps need to be taken to rebuild the workplace relations, to address the relationship between the parties, if it's recoverable at all. But there's a lot of good work that can be done along the harassment continuum within the Treasury Board policy, including at the end of it, if it is founded, where a manager within the core public administration is in a position to say, okay, I see what's happened here, and I will now issue discipline if I feel it's appropriate. Now, in the RCMP world, what happens is we can only go so far with that, because we can attempt to engage in early resolution if it's a harassment complaint. However, as soon as it appears, and that's the test under the Act, is if it appears to the person in command or in the chain of command of the member who is the respondent in a complaint, if it appears to them that there is a violation of the Code of Conduct, then they initiate an investigation. They could rely on the harassment investigation that was done under the Treasury Board policy, but the challenge you run into there is the statements may not have been taken in a way that will allow it to feed into an adversarial process, a very court-like process. And that is ultimately one of the outcomes of our conduct system, our discipline system, is that once it's into the discipline world, it's no longer dealing with relationships. It's no longer trying to address the issues that are in the workplace. It's no longer focused on how can we assist the complainant, how can we deal with the inappropriate behavior of the respondent. It becomes very much, what evidence do I need to gather in order to prove that there was a violation or contravention of the Code of Conduct? And as soon as we get into there, again, it's very court-based. There are certain rights that a member who is subject to the discipline system has access to. There are certain limitations on what can be done within the Code of Conduct process. You can't engage in early resolution. For example, once that is engaged. The other piece is, under the Treasury Board policy, there is a requirement to provide the complainant with access to a draft report in order to make sure that, in their eyes, everything has been done that needs to be done. Well, if it's gone into the Code of Conduct, we don't have that right, because the process is designed, again, like I said, to prove or disprove a contravention of the Code of Conduct. And so these two processes, instead of lining up and coming out at the same place, the harassment process starts, but at some point it stops, and then Part 4 picks it up and runs with it. And as soon as you do that, it's not the same, you're not looking at the same issue anymore. You're not looking at harassment, you're looking at the Code of Conduct. And the other challenge is the outcomes are very different. The ability of the complainant to play a role in influencing that outcome is minimized outside of being a witness. They're two very different processes with two very different
Je vais devoir
intentions.
vous arrêter ici, malheureusement.
Unfortunately, I think I must interrupt you. I'm very sorry. It was very interesting. So thank you, and let's move back across the table. Ms. Day, you've got 5 minutes. Thank you, and thank you for being here. I've got 2 daughters myself, and I'm not sure I would recommend to either of them that they enter the RCMP or any other public force like the Army. I think that there's quite too much of an imbalance of power between men and women, and too many men in upper management. However, I think things could improve. Ms. Ashton asked you if there were any surveys that had been done when RCMP staff left in order, or quit, resigned from the institute, to find out why they were leaving. Could you let us know if there were such surveys and if there were any specific questions about sexual harassment? And secondly, is that issue clearly spelled out?
It's not a survey per se as an interview when people are leaving, and we call it an exit interview. It's an open-ended, it's not a set, there's no set questions, therefore there is none about sexual harassment per se. However, when exit interviews are done, it would be an open-ended, and any information could come forward. And if that was relevant, I assume that there would be questions asked, or if that came forward, if sexual harassment came forward as an issue for the person leaving, then there would be follow-up questions to that regard.
Donc, dans l'entrevue de départ,
so in the exit interview, there are no specific questions on sexual harassment, and the issue is not described in a specific way.
Interview is more open-ended, and it's a free-flowing interview, so it wouldn't be a prescribed set of questions. I'm confident that if somebody raised the issue of sexual harassment, that they would not just say thank you and move on. It would be a precursor to asking more questions about that, and to digging in deeper to find out what went on.
dans ce que vous prévoyez au niveau
What are you planning for prevention? There are several objectives about improving respect in the workplace, improved training, adopting preventive techniques. Are you going to add to your objectives the possibility of questioning or finding out more about from people who are leaving in order to see whether or not the facts correspond to what you're thinking? Because when you're still unemployed, you may not dare speak up about certain things, but if you're leaving, you may speak more frankly and say, well, this was my experience while I was working for you. So are you going to add that type of question to the exit interviews?
It's a very valid point that people will be open when they're leaving, and that we might get some of our best information from that. We're not planning to add a question about that. I think we would more likely be focusing on having those interviews done as opposed to prescribing them. I do know I'm looking at reasons for why people, I'm just starting now, I've assigned someone to look at reasons why people are leaving the process, the recruiting process, for instance. And I know that at Depot they do definitely 100% interviews on why people leave Depot. So.
dans l'approche que vous avez
In your approach, you also have one that is preventative as described in your presentation. Are there going to be more major corrections brought, such as zero tolerance, warning 1, 2, 3, and 3 strikes you're out, which is the case in situations of sexual harassment in other places? Are you going to have a system that makes it such that forces the person to stop this harassing behavior?
Strike or any specific set of circumstances like that, I mean, it is zero tolerance. It will be zero tolerance. That is our commitment, to have zero tolerance. The discipline itself, as it's set out right now, would go to an adjudication board, at which case the sanction would take part, and that's where you would see what you're referring to, I think, is the 3 strikes you're out, or the end result, I guess. And that's where you would see that, is at a discipline
Je dois
board.
vous arrêter ici, malheureusement.
Unfortunately, I must interrupt you. Madame Day's time is up. We've got 2 or 3 minutes left before this panel ends. So, Ms. Empler, please go ahead. You've got the rest of the time.
To both of you for being here today and for your presentation on this very important issue. I think the whole reason that we're here is because we're all very concerned about what's going on, and we want to find out more from you. And so you started, you mentioned statistics in your presentation, specifically that the average number of complaints at 150 a year comprised, and of that, about 3% were identified as sexual harassment, so that equals about 3 or 4. Are there other types of statistics that you keep specifically on the new policies and programs, or recent?
Well, we have just in the last year gone to the central management oversight of harassment, so we have taken all of, part of that was to take all of the harassment cases and input them into the system, electronic system. Unfortunately, that was just tombstone data, so our stats are not so helpful for what you're looking for, I don't think.
Okay.
We have started since January 1st to enter more, so the output of those complaints.
Thank you. Quick question regarding a point that was made earlier regarding the use of the word incident versus sexual harassment, specifically as terminology in C-42. Will that terminology in any way hinder you being able to deal with sexual harassment cases?
Not at all, but I'll turn it over for...
Actually, the reference to harassment is under what would become the new HR, or Human Resource Management Authorities for the Commissioner, and it spells out that the Commissioner may establish a process for the investigation and resolution of harassment disputes, is what it says.
Sexual harassment would absolutely be included in that?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure that no one was in any way concerned about the wording used in C-42. Thank you. You mentioned also...
Je m'excuse, Madame Embler, je vais devoir vous arrêter.
I'm very sorry, Ms. Embler, but I'm going to have to stop you since this is the end of the panel, and we've had to take 5 minutes off of each panel today because we have committee business to attend at the end of each panel. So I'd like to thank you for having joined us here this morning. It was most interesting, and I'm going to suspend for a few minutes so that the next witnesses may sit down. Thank you.
je demanderai aux gens de revenir s'asseoir. On va recommencer.
So could people please come and sit down again? We will be beginning in a few seconds.
On avait besoin d'une pause, ça là. Alors,
So, if you don't mind, we will begin anew. So, welcome. Good morning, and I'd like to welcome the second panel of witnesses. We are now joined by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police External Review Committee. First of all, Ms. Catherine Ebbs, who is the chair, and David Paradiso, executive director and senior counsel. So the way things will work today is that you will have 10 minutes for your remarks, after which we will move on to questions. Please go ahead. You have 10 minutes.
As you just said, my name is Catherine Ebbs. I've been chair of the External Review Committee since 2005, and I'm happy to have with me Mr. David Paradiso, who's our executive director and senior counsel. I have a very brief opening statement of about 5 minutes. Madame la Présidente et membres.
Madam Chair and distinguished members of this committee, I would like to thank you for having invited me to come and speak before you today. I am delighted to have the opportunity to explain the RCMP External Review Committee's mandate, as well as the extent, the scope of its powers, and the reasons for which it was created.
Review Committee, or ERC, was created in 1986 to provide RCMP management and their regular and civilian members with an independent, arm's-length labor relations tribunal. For almost 25 years, the ERC has provided the RCMP with an objective and neutral service. We also offer the general public a unique window into the labor dispute mechanisms of the RCMP. Because the RCMP is the only non-unionized police force in Canada, the ERC's independence from the internal processes is essential to assuring that grievances and disciplinary rulings are examined in a fair and completely neutral manner. Notre comité joue un rôle important dans le maintien de la.
Our committee plays an important role in maintaining public trust with respect to the RCMP and ensuring that the RCMP respects the law and human rights in workplace relationships. Our committee is charged with reviewing grievances, disciplinary measures, as well as cases of termination and demotion brought to its attention by the RCMP, and following that, presenting its recommendations to the RCMP Commissioner.
Review. In all grievance, discipline, discharge, and demotion matters referred to it, the ERC bases its review on the record before it. This includes all of the original documents, submissions of the parties, and the decision made. In this respect, we operate somewhat like a court of appeal, as we only conduct our review on the record of evidence. However, unlike a court of appeal, our reports are not rulings, only recommendations. Our word is not law. We prepare recommendations and findings that are given to the parties as well as to the Commissioner of the RCMP. The law requires that the Commissioner consider our recommendations, but is not bound by law to accept them. The RCMP Commissioner has the final say in all cases. Historically, the RCMP Commissioner's acceptance rate of ERC recommendations is in the range of approximately 85%. If the Commissioner decides not to follow them, the Commissioner is required to explain in writing the reasons why our recommendations were not followed. Je crois comprendre que le comité
I understand that the Standing Committee on the Status of Women is interested in hearing from various experts as to the role and challenges faced by women who work in the RCMP and for the entire public service. cases of harassment in the workplace, whether they be of a sexual nature or other, are a major concern for each and every one of us.
99 cases related to harassment have been referred to the ERC for review. These 99 cases deal with such subjects as alleged abuse of authority, on-the-job pranks, peer-to-peer bullying, as well as sexual harassment. I would like to stress that it is the ERC's view that workplace harassment of any kind must be dealt with in a manner that is both timely and fair. Those with the responsibility of dealing with complaints need to be fully trained, and there needs to be consistency in how complaints are managed across all regions of the country. We believe the focus should be on prevention, early detection, and intervention as a way of limiting all harassment. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
I thank you for your attention, and I am pleased to answer your questions. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Ebbs, for your testimony. So let's move on to questions. Ms. Embler, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you to both of you for being here today and for your brief presentation. So that gives us more time for questions, which we really very much appreciate. And you mentioned that 30 cases. I just want to talk about numbers and statistics, which is where I left off actually in the last hour. You mentioned that 30 cases are referred to the review committee every year, and you address about 25 of them. Or no, sorry, you didn't mention that. I looked up that. That was sorry. I'm reading my own notes here. I think you may have mentioned that at committee. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So I was reading that in the committee notes. Can you please tell me what happens to the those 5 and why they wouldn't be looked at?
Those statistics, we were talking about the number of cases that, it can go up and down in any given year. It's not static, but on the average, that is what the figures would be. So that would mean that in any given year we would receive 30, and in any given year we would work on and finish our recommendations in 25, but we're not talking about the same cases.
Got it.
Because at the beginning of the year, we would have cases that are still waiting that haven't been dealt with.
So it's not like some fall off the grid or don't get looked at.
We review every case that's referred to us.
Oh, good. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. That's why I heard you say that all complaints are investigated, and I couldn't figure out the math, but now I get it. Thank you.
The only time we wouldn't review a case is if the member asked us not to review it. That would be one reason.
Right, thank you. I'm also trying to reconcile the zero tolerance policy with the continuum. The previous panel, also RCMP mentioned the continuum of harassment. Is this something that you would be aware of? It's a sort of a new concept to help people who might be hesitant in bringing forward complaints, and it's. Is this ringing a bell at all? Sorry.
I'm not familiar. As you know, the ERC is completely independent from the RCMP.
Right.
And I don't know.
Okay. No, that's okay. That's okay. Then I guess what I want to ask then specifically is, do you keep statistics? Do you what would be the result of one of the review committee's decisions? What happens? Does the commissioner prepares a report, makes recommendations? What happens at the end of the process?
Okay. Well, if we use as an example a harassment-related case, that case would have gone through a process internally before we saw it,
Right.
and there would have been a decision made internally at the first level, because we are involved at the appeal level. So if either party decided to bring it to the next level, then we would get the case. We would review it, we'd prepare a report, and we'd provide findings and recommendations to the Commissioner of the RCMP. Then the file, once it reached the Commissioner's desk, he would make a final decision. And as I said, the law is very clear that he must consider the ERC recommendation, and if he doesn't accept it, he has to explain why.
Right. Okay.
That's the end of the process, except if a member would bring it to the court for judicial review.
Okay. That's the one more step that they could possibly take after the review. Could you describe what a recommendation looks like? What type of recommendation is usual? What sorts of recommendations can the review commission make? And would they ever include training recommendations?
Generally speaking, the recommendation in each case relates to what we feel the commissioner should decide. So the vast majority of our recommendations would be, for example, on a harassment grievance. After our review, we would recommend to the commissioner that he allow the grievance or that he deny the grievance, and then we give our reasons why. In a discipline, it would be similar. We would recommend that he allow the appeal or that he refuse the appeal. So the bulk of our recommendations are very specific to the case that we're reviewing. There are occasions where we have made recommendations that go beyond the case. For example, there are cases where we have found that in certain types of subjects, not related. I don't think we've done this in harassment cases, but in other types of cases, we might say that the policy is very difficult to understand, and we would recommend that the commissioner order a review of that policy to see if it could be improved. Those kind of recommendations.
Okay, no, that's good to know. And of these, of the cases that you see in a year or over a period of time, do you keep statistics specifically on the types of cases that you see and how many are sexual harassment cases? And have you personally dealt with very many sexual harassment cases?
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I can just say briefly that my time in the 7 years, I have dealt with next to no sexual harassment cases.
Oh.
And I will just Mr. Paradiso to take 10 seconds.
We don't specifically keep statistics on sexual harassment grievances. We do have harassment grievances, which is why we came up with our 99 number over the last 25 years.
Je vais
Harassment
devoir vous arrêter ici. Madame Embler, vous avez écoulé votre temps.
Thank you.
Afraid I must interrupt you, Ms. Embley. Your time is up. Thank you. Let's now move across the table with Ms. Ashton. You have 7 minutes.
Mr. Moniz, so we've heard that, obviously, I mean, there's a court case regarding the sexual harassment experienced by rank-and-file women members in the RCMP, and yet you've mentioned that very few cases have come to your attention. Why do you think that's the case?
I don't know the reason, but I can think of some possible answers. As I said, we are at an appeal level of the process. So it could be that there are complaints made, dealt with at the first level, and aren't taken to appeal. That could be one reason why we don't see as many. And then, of course, we know there is a situation where there are some people who feel that they've been harassed who don't even make the complaint. I think that's very unfortunate that they think that, and the result is that case will never get to us, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's an interesting point. I mean, obviously, a number of women see the courts as being a place where they can take these very serious allegations forward. Have you seen any trends around sexual harassment? I mean, you spoke of the 99 cases. Have you seen any trends over time with respect to those cases, whatever they may be, whether it's the kind or just any difference over time within these last 25 years when it comes to sexual harassment complaints, or I guess appeals as you deal with?
There's been so few that I would hesitate to talk about trends. In relation to harassment cases in general, even there, I wouldn't want to say that I can see the whole picture just by the cases that come to us, because we have just a very unique window. But in the cases that have come to us, I think we've seen things that happen that make us, that give us ideas, as I said in the presentation, about principles that we think are really important in any system that's going to deal with harassment effectively. And I think that training is a very, very big component, and early resolution, because we are at the appeal level. We see cases that have been in the system for quite a while, and I see it just in reading the files the toll that takes on all the parties, the person who complained, the person who's alleged to have harassed, even the work environment of those people. I think that is a key element to ensure that harassment issues are dealt with effectively right at the outset. I think that's a key.
With respect to your recommendations, do any of your recommendations, I should note that a number of witnesses have pointed out that workplace culture, and especially the culture that exists in hierarchical workplaces where few women are represented at all levels, makes it for situations that are more prone to harassment, or sexual harassment in particular. Do any of your recommendations focus on changing workplace culture within the RCMP?
Not any of our recommendations specifically. I understand that there is a consensus that the culture within the RCMP needs to change, and I think that provides really an excellent opportunity for improvements to be made on these labor relations processes, because I see a very big link between a healthy and respectful workplace and effective, timely, and fair labor relations processes.
Do you think, in terms of the work that you do and getting a sense of the kinds of challenges that members are facing in the RCMP, do you think it's important that the RCMP have effective exit surveys and an understanding in terms of data of the kind of harassment, period, if there's harassment that members are facing, period, and what kind of harassment that might be?
I think that sounds to me like an excellent idea, because that could provide some really significant information that would point them to places where they need to do extra work.
Okay. Combien de temps est-ce que j'ai? Okay. I want to turn to Bill C-42, as I noted earlier that we in the NDP will not be supporting it in third reading because the gaps are still extensive, and certainly we're very concerned by the fact that sexual harassment, in fact, harassment period, isn't mentioned in the legislation. But I do want to ask, with respect to C-42's impact on your work. So C-42 would require the External Review Committee to establish time limits within which grievances and appeals will be dealt with. So my question is, will the legislation result in shorter times, or will it simply make the current timeframes public and subject to an annual report to the Minister of Public Safety?
Well, I accept that just establishing timeframes doesn't necessarily mean that an agency is going to meet them. I think it will. We actually do work with desired timeframes now, So that would just be a matter of publishing them in our annual report. At the present time, we don't meet those time frames. They give they're a goal that we would hope to attain, but we don't meet them.
So with C-42, if it were to pass, it's still not binding?
I don't believe so. I think that the requirement would be that those timeframes be made public and that there may be an explanation, if they're not met, of why they're not met. I think that's my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, which speaks to some of the broader concerns that we have in terms of the need to not just talk about, well, certainly that the legislation is inadequate. Can you advise the committee how long such grievances and appeals that you're working with are currently taking on average, and if you know if cases related to sexual harassment take more or less time than others?
Très, très, très rapidement.
Just very quickly, please.
Harassment cases are more time-consuming and painstaking than most ordinary grievances.
Je dois vous arrêter ici, Madame Ashton.
And now I'll have to stop you there, Ms. Ashton. So let's move on to Ms. Young. You have 7 minutes.
And for sharing your experiences with us. I just have a couple of comments, I guess, and questions, obviously. In the cases that you've dealt with, would you say 100% of them are where the griever is a woman?
No, not at all.
Could you give me a percentage? What would that be?
I don't know if we have the percentages here, but we could certainly provide them if we don't. But no, we receive many harassment grievances that are filed by men.
I see. So
most of those would be, if I could just, most of those I would think would be in the subject of abuse of authority, for example.
Right. Okay. So it would be fair to say then that not all people that get sexually harassed or harassed at work are women. That men also get harassed. Is that what your experience has been?
My answer was not related to sexual harassment.
Yes.
I don't know whether we've ever. I don't know if I can answer that based on what I've seen at the. I don't think I would know that answer.
Okay. Right. Thank you for that. I wanted to also ask you is, have you had incidents where, it was the same harasser? I mean, for example, you can have one person be a harasser at the workforce, and which may spawn 30 different incidents because other people will complain against them, obviously. So it occurs to me that we are counting the incidents, which is a good thing to do, but are we also keeping track of maybe vexatious harassers? So have you had incidents where people have come back and you've sort of said, oh, this is the same person? I don't want to say whether it's male or female because obviously, you said that there have been both, who has an ongoing or chronic, predisposition to harass.
Yes, we have definitely seen examples of that there was one harasser and a number of people involved.
And are there different mechanisms or different consequences, or earlier on we heard from the RCMP, conduct issues that we can put these people through, or do they just kind of go through, the same thing 30 times or whatever, and then they may get a letter in their file or some such thing as an outcome?
The example that I'm thinking about that the ERC dealt with was a discipline matter, so that the actions of this alleged harasser led to a disciplinary hearing because it was seen as a disgraceful conduct.
Right. And in your experience, how often has a disciplinary hearing resulted in somebody being let go?
Well, we have the cases that we get are often ordered to resign or to be dismissed. Right. But in terms of global statistics, I think you would have to get those from the RCMP.
I see. Okay. And in your experience with the cases that you do get, how many people are then let go or ordered to resign? Or, I mean, by the time they get to your appeal process, I'm assuming that that's a fairly serious place to be, because it's kind of like you're the final appeal mechanism. Am I correct about that?
Well, we are part of the final appeal mechanism because we make the recommendation. It's the commissioner that makes the final decision.
Right.
And when you're talking about discipline matters, the appeal could have been presented not only by the member who was being disciplined, but also by the appropriate officer who started the whole investigation. So we get both. In terms of numbers, I think that's something that we could provide more detail on. We don't really have those numbers here.
So is it suffice to say that by the time it gets to your review committee that it is fairly, very, serious, and it does result in some fairly serious action or...
Yes, because right now, the way the system works within the RCMP is right at the outset, if an officer believes that the member there's misconduct there, they have a choice right at the outset, depending on what that misconduct is, to go an informal route or a formal route. So once it starts on the formal route, that means that it's more serious. And then it gets to a hearing, a full hearing, and then there's the decision that's made, which can go up to dismissal in order to resign. So once it goes to the formal route, that is an indication that it's being treated very seriously.
Now, given your extensive experience, because you did say that you've been, on the review committee for many numbers of years, and et cetera, and obviously your training as a lawyer and all of that, would you say that we have a fairly, a system that has a fairly high standard then, given what you're telling us right now?
A system for
dealing with harassment and addressing these issues?
The system right now is really governed by, as was mentioned before, the Treasury Board policy on harassment, and the RCMP has their own policy that kind of builds on the Treasury Board policy. There are a lot of elements in there that are very positive.
Would you say Bill C-42 will help?
To the extent that Bill C-42 will assist the commissioner when he is revising these policies and making them even more timely, more fair, that it will be of assistance.
Thank you very much for your time. Do I have any more time?
10 seconds.
Then I'm going to ask Mr. Paradiso to add any of his thoughts. Would you agree with what Ms. Ebbs has said?
I agree with what the chair has said.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. So, Ms. Scrow, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for the work that you attempt to do. Clearly, a lot of people don't have the confidence levels to get up and just walk away and don't even bother to appeal. I wanted to read a couple of quotes from 3 different members that was in a report that I referenced earlier that I hope the committee will have shortly. One of them was from one of the RCMP officers interviewed. I would never report harassment. I have seen what happens to those who have, and their life was made hell by those in the management positions who use their authority to intimidate. Second was, we wear a bulletproof vest to protect ourselves from the bad guys out there, but really we need to be wearing the vest to protect ourselves from the bad guys inside our own organization. And the third one, and again, these are different people. The women I know that have encountered difficulty were strong, independent, and confident. These women were pushed out of jobs when they had expertise and interest and had to start over at an advanced point in their careers at jobs that they did not choose. This is a serious and very real problem in the RCMP, going well beyond an unwelcome joke. It is uglier than most people think. In the work that you're doing at your senior level of an appeal, you've no doubt been reading newspapers and hearing reports of a variety of comments and so on. in particular to harassment, specifically sexual harassment of women, which is why we're really looking at this issue from the status of women's perspective. What was your feeling when you were hearing these comments, knowing what you deal with at your level and how few get to you? Did you question why you weren't getting more complaints to you, even though you're at an appeal process?
Well, firstly, I find it very unfortunate that there are situations where people feel that they have no recourse. They have issues and complaints and that they don't feel that the recourse is going to work for them. I think that is very, very unfortunate. And hopefully, with the work that is being done to make the process of handling these complaints more efficient, more fair, hopefully that will build more confidence for people who are in similar situations.
The different recommendations that you have made to the Commissioner, you said 85% of them were accepted by him. Were those 85% basically concurring with what it was that the RCMP wanted to achieve? Or were they of a different opinion than what the force was recommending?
They were both. We don't always agree with the decision that was made at the first level, if that's what I understand you're referring to.
Do you have any way of monitoring what kind of action happens as a result of your recommendation?
We don't get formal notice of what happens. We do get, what we get is when we have presented findings and recommendations to the Commissioner, we receive the Commissioner's full decision when he makes it. So we know exactly what the outcome was of that decision.
Do you feel a level of intimidation from the RCMP if you were to go contrary to their recommendations?
Oh, no, absolutely not. And I think in the 25 years of the committee, I think that our independence has been respected. I don't feel that at all.
How many people also work with you and Mr. Paradiso?
We are very small. I am the chair and the only one who has authority to make the findings and recommendations, and I'm supported by Mr. Paradiso and how many more? Four full-time staff.
So there's
Six
four
in total.
6 full-time in total. Mm-hmm. And you do, on average, handle 30 a year?
Yes, on average.
On average. And how long does it take, relative to the seriousness of the appeal, does it take for you to go through that process?
It can vary quite a bit because we have different types of cases, the grievances, the discipline matters. So it can take anywhere from weeks to, it can take weeks, from a couple of weeks to months, depending on the complexity of the case.
Are most of them dismissal appeals that you receive at your level?
Our caseload in total, most of them would be grievances. And those grievances can deal with a number of matters. We have harassment grievances, as we were talking about, grievances about monetary issues like relocation, isolated post travel, stoppage, suspension without pay would go as a grievance. So there'd be a lot of different subjects we deal with there, and then we have the discipline cases, but the majority are grievances.
Have you been asked about doing some recommendations to the Commissioner as to how you might see streamlining some of the multitude of processes and levels? And I mean, it's just listening to everything this morning about all the different levels, and it's here and it's there. I mean, just give up and go. That's exactly what I would think most people feel, and many of the women that I have spoken to, in particular the women, just develop that attitude. It's just forget it. There's just no way you're going to continue. Have you been asked to make some recommendations as to how the appeal process might even be streamlined that might better help some of the individuals who want to come forward?
Yes, we have asked. We have been consulted, and we have been told that we will be consulted in the process that's ongoing to develop better processes.
And has that been recently that you have been consulted to do this, or is that?
Yes, but the ERC has been consulted in other initiatives in the past as well.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. That was exactly 7 minutes. So let's move back across the table with Mr. Aspin. You have, you've now got 5 minutes.
To you both, and for giving us input on such an important subject. I'm curious about the ERC, External Review Committee. Now, you mentioned you're 2 members plus a legal team of 4 members?
No, I'm the only one who has the authority to make the findings and recommendations. There's only 1 member, and then I'm supported by 5 public servants.
Okay, and can you give us a bit of history as to how long this has been in existence and how you were appointed?
The ERC has existed for 25 years. It came out of a study that was done by Justice René Marin in the 70s about the internal work environment within the RCMP, and he recommended some pretty big changes to the internal structures, as well as the creation of the ERC, the External Review Committee, and our sister agency, the committee that deals with public complaints. In the 25 years, we have fulfilled that function. I think I believe, the 4th chair, and as I said, I was appointed in 2005. I originally began with the committee in 2003 as legal counsel.
Okay. You mentioned that the Treasury Board guidelines offer an alternative method of dealing with incidents of sexual harassment wherein both parties can engage in resolution and the complainant has more control over the process. Do you think that this type of process will encourage women to deal with incidents at an earlier stage?
I think that any change that will promote or that will assist parties to find a resolution at the earliest possible stage will be extremely helpful and will definitely increase the confidence level for the people who might be thinking of using it.
Now, you mentioned the grievance procedure, and I'd just like to get a finer appreciation of the grievance procedure that you go through. Can you give us what options are available after a decision has been taken by the committee and the commissioner has made a ruling?
If we talk about harassment, if we'll talk about harassment grievances as an example, the recommendation could be from the ERC that, first of all, the grievance could have been presented usually either by the person who made the complaint at the outset, where the finding was that the allegation of a harassment was not established, or it could be a grievance by the person who was found to have harassed. So it could come from either party. And our recommendation to the commissioner after our review would be to either allow the grievance or deny the grievance, keep the decision as it was at the outset. And in our review, we look at what was decided, but we also looked at how it's decided. So we looked at the process to see if it was fair. For example, if in a harassment grievance we find that the process wasn't followed, we would recommend to the commissioner that he accept our finding, and in that case, he would send the matter back to be dealt with properly. That would be an example of an outcome.
I see. And one quick question, if I may, Chair.
Could you give us an idea of how you were appointed? How was this body appointed?
Well, I am a governor and council appointment. There was a selection process. The post was advertised. I was interviewed, and I was actually my first appointment. I also appeared before a parliamentary committee after it was recommended that I be appointed.
Alors, on passe maintenant de
So let's move back to the other side of the table. Ms. Asania, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your remarks. Ms. Epps, earlier you mentioned the importance of a fairly quick resolution to harassment problems. Could you please tell us what type of process you would envisage and who could implement such a process? There are processes that already exist in Treasury Board's policies. I think that, first of all, you could offer the parties the possibility of sitting down to a type of mediation and some kind of informal conflict resolution process. I think that in cases of harassment, using such a process is usually preferable. It is better also for the parties to be supported by an expert or a facilitator of some type, someone with those types of skills. I think that in all conflict cases, this is a strategy that can really work quite well and be truly beneficial to both parties. This aspect of resolving conflicts as quickly as possible in such cases is essential. If we want processes that work well and that will be embraced by the members, that is the case, and all of this will also lead to a healthier and more respectful workplace too. Thank you. Earlier you mentioned recommendations that you recommend made by the members to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace and other types of harassment too. Could you speak to us more about that? Well, that's a bit outside of my own area of expertise. I think that I listened to the responses by the RCMP members who were here earlier, and they said that it was an important part of their initiative, having even mandatory training on harassment. As to the methods that would be best to use, I do not feel able to answer that portion of your question. Earlier, the question was asked, but we didn't have enough time to hear the answer. Could you give us information as to the time that it takes to deal with and process sexual harassment cases? Do you have that type of information? Have you collected it? I couldn't say so, since there are so few cases of sexual harassment that come to our attention, that I cannot answer that question. I could say, more generally speaking, that normally harassment grievances take longer to resolve than others, given the greater complexity of the facts. And often the submissions and the issues that are raised are also more complex. Is it because you don't have the numbers before you that you can't tell us about them, or is it that you have them somewhere else and you could provide them later on? Is that it? Well, I think I will ask Mr. Paradisa to answer that question.
Cases, because we don't identify them specifically and we don't track them, so we have to go over our cases and then identify how long they've taken.
D'accord. Si j'ai bien compris, donc.
I see. So if I've correctly understood, how much time do I have left, Madam Chair? If I've correctly understood you, the committee reviews harassment cases and makes recommendations to the commissioner, but the commissioner is not obliged to implement those recommendations. So what is the point in making recommendations? Would it not be preferable to have something else that ensures that there's a follow-up of some sort? Well, under the existing system, it is true that what we do is submit recommendations to the Commissioner. But in the history of the committee, we have found that our recommendations may and sometimes do influence the decisions made by RCMP management in such cases. Now, I do think it's important that it be a recommendation rather than a final decision, because it is an external process. It is well respected, and we want it to be robust, as we say in English. I do think that is an important principle. Thank you, Ms. Ebbs. We have 5 minutes left for questions. We will conclude with Ms. Young. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead. Or Ms. Bateman, would you like to share the time? Yes, I would like to share the time if that's possible. Would you like to begin?
You have spoken, and I will just take part of the time because we both wanted to have the chance to ask you, but you clearly have a lot of experience in this, and I'm delighted to hear that you are going to be consulted on a variety of levels as people re-examine their approach. The comment was made earlier, and I forget which one of our colleagues spoke to the difference of management and leadership. And, it's always been my experience that a good manager is a leader, and this really is a leadership issue, in my view. Could you speak to that, or do you have some views that you would like to share with your key client?
Well, I don't. I think I would only just say, as a personal opinion, that I think that with an initiative like this, where the force is trying to improve the systems that are in place, to develop strategies to even prevent the problem before it starts.
Exactly, with training.
That leadership is key.
Yeah.
And the fact that the Commissioner has made this one of his priorities, I think, can't but help to move that initiative along.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate that. And the training that they have initiated for all of their staff is part and parcel with that leadership component, I imagine.
Oh, yes, I would think so.
Okay. Et maintenant, avec mon collègue.
And now, along with my colleague, Ms. Young, who is going to take over the questioning.
Particularly impressed by your, I think because you're an independent review committee, you have sort of an ability to step back, in fact, a little bit, and sort of see what not just the RCMP is possibly going through, because they are part of the federal civil service, but perhaps have some views about the overall systems. And I was particularly impressed by sort of your objective and experienced view on this. So I wanted to ask you some final questions, and just to reconfirm what I thought I heard today, because we heard some things earlier and right now. So what I thought I heard was that the reason why you don't have separate or collect separate statistics for sexual harassment per se is because the cases that come to you are so few. Would you like to confirm that, or?
We've just simply never tracked sexual harassment cases separately from other harassment.
Right. Yes.
But we have a good idea that they are very, very few.
Okay. And secondly, it appeared, based on your testimony, you have said that you are listened to, that you have influence, that, when you make recommendations, that the RCMP does embrace them or does try to implement them. Would you say that that's true?
Yes, yeah, we do have examples, quite numerous examples of that.
Would you say that, of course, we would strive for zero tolerance? In your view, after 25 years of experience, is that truly possible?
Oh, well,
given human behavior and all of that?
I think whether or not it is actually possible, that's got to be our target.
Yes,
Because-
absolutely. I think we all agree about that in this room. Yes. Now, given that, and the different appeal systems, and we've heard about the Treasury Board guidelines, and I think that, what the RCMP have to go through, would you say, and because we ended up here in the last place, will Bill 42 have an impact? And given the lead and the management, and the importance that the commissioners put on this, obviously, and the fact that earlier on we had people that said there's no magic bullet, there's no one solution that's going to make all this go away or solve all these problems. We have to do a number of different things because there is an existing very complex system that we have to improve on various aspects of that, whether it be training, whether it be leadership, whether it be et cetera, et cetera. So what are your thoughts, given that you have a bit more time now, on C42 and how it will help the system?
Well, I think
Very, very quickly.
Okay, very quickly.
Yes.
The momentum is there, and we just have to make sure that that momentum carries through to some really positive results.
Mr. Paradiso?
Je vous remercie, Madame Young.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Unfortunately, your time is up. So this concludes today's meeting. I would ask you to remain in the room, however, as the committee members have about 10 minutes of committee business to attend. I thank you for having agreed to come and testify today and speak with us. It was most interesting. The meeting is suspended just for a moment so that we can move in camera.